Change Network, an initiative that brought together grassroots organizations from various countries, East Africa, Egypt, Bangladesh, using sport with a specific focus on girls as a tool for positive social behavior change. She's an award-winning international speaker who has given numerous presentations, on sustainable socioeconomic growth and development, with special emphasis on the relationship between the developed and the developing world. My guest is the founder, director of the Sauti Kuu Foundation that seeks to give a voice to financially and socially disadvantaged children and the youth. A couple weeks back, actually, I chanced on a tweet by one Jason Levin. He says, President Obama sits next to you. What do you say to him? And, you know, folks are just dangling in the tweets. Oh man, I'm going to be speechless. I don't know what to say. One tweet just ended it all. Like, killed the conversation. A woman tweeted, "Hey, little bro, how you doing?" And that was it. We checked, and guess what? It was his older sister, Dr.Auma Obama. Now, my wife asked me this morning, so Dr.Auma Obama sits next to you. What are you saying? I said, "Hey, big sis, how are you doing?" She's right here, dog. Hey, big sis, how are you doing?
I'm really well, and thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. And you're looking so well.
Thank you, thank you. I feel well. I love coming to Accra, to Ghana, nice. So it's really great to be here.
It's been almost a weekend here.
Yes, I've been here, yes, over a week already, yeah.
It's home.
It is home.
I'm glad, I'm glad. And, well, even though belated, let me wish you happy International Women's Day again.
Thank you.
I'm sure you did have a good time at the E-Transact event at the Labadi Beach Hotel, where I actually heard you write a letter to your 13-year-old self.
Yes.
And it was quite revealing. How was that?
It was amazing. It was really thinking out of the box. It was a great idea to ask us to reflect back on what brought us to where we are today, and it took a lot of thought to figure out how to put that together, and I'm really glad that I managed to do it, and we all did, and we had a great time. And I just hope that I gave some young people some food for thought to go away with.
What struck you? What really was the highlight of the event for you? We checked, and guess what? It was his older sister, Dr.Auma Obama. Now, my wife asked me this morning, so Dr.Auma Obama sits next to you. What are you saying? I said, "Hey, big sis, how are you doing?"
I think the highlight of the event was the fact that...
Sis, how are you doing?
I'm really well, and thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. And you're looking so well.
Thank you, thank you. I feel well. Allowed within a public but safe context to really be vulnerable, because very often when you've done a lot in life and people perceive you as being very successful, people don't think you're vulnerable. They think you're very, very strong, and we are so used to being strong that we run along with it. And what ends up happening is very often that people feel that I couldn't do as well as she could. I couldn't be in her position because look at what she's achieved. But actually we're all coming from a place where we're very vulnerable, where we are still very vulnerable, and sharing that also gives people the ability to be able to see themselves in our footsteps, see themselves in where we are, because they say you don't have to be perfect to succeed. You just have to keep on trying.
Right. Amazing. Now, are you impressed with the gains that we've made with embracing equity globally, especially when the women conversation comes into play?
I think I wouldn't generalize on that. We've come a very long way, obviously, very much so. I mean, I'm coming in the wake of many women who have done a lot more than I have to move the women's agenda. But I think in terms of opportunity, in terms of equity, to its fullest, we women still have a lot to do. And I think what we need to do is not be governed by our fear of our ability and our strength, because we don't want to take the place of men or leave men behind. I think it's about equity within the space of feeling ourselves as equal human beings.
Right, right. Sauti Kuu has done a lot as well over the past probably decade, right? Tell me about the work and where you think the gaps are now with what you've done.
Yes, Sauti Kuu, we've been working for about 12 years now. And when I started, I think I was somewhat naive, as we are, because we do this out of the passion and the belief that we can make a difference within our communities, we can make a difference in our countries. And I'm no different to that. I also have this sense that, oh, I'm driven, I can make a big difference because I have the opportunity, I can open doors. But what I've realized over the years, it's boiled down to actually making a difference in individuals' lives. It's one person at a time, one child at a time. You cannot change a whole community if you don't change individuals. And one of the key areas that I strongly feel need to be attended to in order to make that happen is, one, like in your program, about personality. Who are you? Who are you within the context of making your future? Basically, that's what it is. That's the one area. What is your role? What is your responsibility? Your accountability to self? And the second thing is education. If we're going to make a difference on this continent, and this applies for all our countries, and actually it applies globally, we need to pay attention to the level of education we're giving everybody. Not private education, not special education, just the regular education, that how we teach our children, what they learn, what they come away with, because the knowledge that they gain, they spend all their time in school. We need to pay a lot more attention to improving the quality of education. And the combination of being well educated in the context of learning properly, learning for growth, not just to earn money, learning to improve your character, learning to be part of a community, a responsible part of the community, beyond just earning a salary, and then learning about how to become a personality in yourself. The combination of that is what will make a community, a people, a country succeed. And we don't pay enough attention to education. And with education, it's about who is educating our children. And that means, who are the teachers? How are we treating our teachers? How are we training our teachers in order to be able to have the tools to teach our most precious goods, our children?
You know, you talk about personality, and it looks like, well, basically, we are all functions of our experiences, our training, our socialization, and all. From where you personally sit and your experiences, how has all of these shaped you into the kind of person you are?
What has helped me a lot is that I've always had people who have supported me. And I think that is the key thing about my foundation, which many people say it's strong voices, but actually it's even more than that. We say powerful voices, powerful voices. And what happened in my case personally is I always had people who believed in me. And it takes actually just one person to believe in you for you to excel. Because then you learn to start believing in yourself. And the more people believe in you, the more you start realizing and valuing yourself, because very often we don't value ourselves enough. We listen to the negative voices that say we can't do this, we're not good enough, we're doing this and that wrong. We listen a lot to those voices. But the voices that give you that strength, that tell you the affirmative voices, we tend to say, oh, that I get it a lot from my daughter, or that you're only saying that because you're my mom. I said, no, it's not because I'm your mom. It's because I honestly believe you're a great person, that you do this and that wonderfully. But we tend to put it down, and especially women. And this is very unfortunate. So one thing I learned was that to learn to appreciate myself and to take from the support that I was getting from the different people I met, and not just people who are at the high end, you know, celebrated people, but even if it was just my house help who gave me some insight into how certain behavior could be done differently. So I listen a lot, I learn a lot from others, and I think that's what helped me along the way, to have the humility to accept that others can teach you.
You know, ideally, you would want that, you mentioned about that one person who believes in you, or who probably would just urge you on to say, you can do this. And ideally, would want that to be from our nuclear family or our closest people. Oftentimes, it's not really those people who, you know, energize us to go further. In your case, can you point to where these energies came from?
I think, like I said, school is such an important space. We spend so much time there. And in my case, I think what helped me, and I even wrote it in my letter to my 13-year-old self, my boarding school was really my salvation. Because I had a lot of teaching staff that could see the potential in me and would would tell me that, would constantly be telling me, you are a lot more than what you think you are. And they would drive me forward and motivate me to give more of myself. And they would let me have a voice. And that is so important, because very often adults think that if you let young people talk, they're being disrespectful or rude. We're very insecure as adults very often, although we don't admit it. And I was allowed to use my voice. I was allowed to articulate myself. I was allowed to formulate the thoughts that I had in my head and bring them out and have a discussion and a conversation with those who supported me. And this happened already while I was a teenager, while I was in high school. So I am very grateful for the school that I went to. And that's why I think education and where you go to school and what you learn at school is so critical, because you spend so much time there. And your parents tend to, unfortunately, not so often affirm you, because the expectations of you are so high, and it's seldom that you do actually, we meet those expectations, and they can't help themselves but keep trying to guide you and tell you, oh, you didn't do that right, because they think they're doing good. But very often what they end up doing is they make you feel that you're not good enough. So sometimes you have to go outside of the family to look for that affirmation, to realize that you're more than good enough. You're actually great.
Yeah. Where was this school though?
In Kenya.
In Kenya.
To school in Kenya.
Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Kenya. I went to school in Kenya. I left the country when I was in my late teens to go and study. That's when I left the country. So
share a bit with me about growing up in Kenya.
It was very diverse.
Your father was a politician at the time, isn't it?
No, he was a government worker.
He was a government worker.
He had a lot of thoughts. He expressed his thoughts a lot, so people assume he was a politician. He wasn't. He was a government official. He worked in government, in finance.
He wasn't affiliated with any political party?
No. He wrote a lot about Pan-Africanism with regards to the economy, because that's what he studied. He was an economist. And he was very articulate, basically. And I experienced that. I grew up with him being very articulate, and he taught me, say what you think. Don't do things, beating around the bush and all. And I am very direct, so it comes from being his daughter. And it was quite a diverse upbringing, because I moved to live with my father and my older brother when I was very young. My parents separated, so I grew up actually with a stepmother. Which was interesting, because actually she was white, and I keep forgetting that I grew up with a white stepmother, and it was not too easy in many ways when I look back and I reflect back. It was not easy because I think the idea of being a mother to African kids was very alien and foreign to her. I don't think she could handle that.
Where was she from?
She was from America.
America, okay.
She couldn't handle that. And I speak about it in my letter. That's why I'm speaking to you about it now. Yes. I normally wouldn't, but since it's out there in the letter to my 13-year-old self. Yes. And it was interesting, because I was talking to some friends and family about it, and I said, actually, I keep forgetting that this was the case. So imagine an African child, a black child as myself, growing up with a white mother and calling her mommy all the time, because that's what, as a 4-year-old, I was told, this is your mommy, so I was told to call her mommy. And the memory of your own mother fades with time, so this is mommy, this is all you know. And when I look back at it now, and in that time, in the 60s, it was profound in many ways, and in many ways it was interesting, because I don't think she saw herself as our mother. But at the same time, these two little children were calling her mommy.
Did it manifest in any way?
Oh, it did, in many ways. I mean, you should go and read my book, and then life happens.
And then life happens.
And so there are moments there that are quite painful. I mean,
Can you share one of them?
Yeah, I guess I could. I mean, it's in my book already, so I guess I can share it. Because normally I would not really want to talk about such things, but I know, for example, that. And I think I'm sharing it because you come away from these things and you grow. Yes. And actually you almost forget, because like I say, I always have to remind myself, oh, you grew up with a white mom. But I know that, for example, when we were little, she couldn't handle the idea of, I mean, it's very big. She couldn't handle the idea of bathing us. So my father had to bring his sister to come and live with us, so she could care for us. So she was in this conflicted situation of being with an African man and not accepting his children. So already that is a very schizophrenic kind of environment. Yeah. And I think, and also probably we could almost say toxic. Well, it is a toxic environment, but at that time we were too young to really realize. So it's only later that it got clearer to me as I researched and I asked, and I said, oh, you know, many things that I had forgotten, I asked about them, talking to my relatives, my grandmother, and yeah, and I was like, wow, in today's time, when you look back at that, you would say that was quite an interesting situation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Being in this environment, being with somebody who you're calling your mother, who actually doesn't accept that role, and you continue to call her mother, and she continues to just respond while knowing that these are not her children, she doesn't have that feeling.
Do you think it got better along the line?
Well, she didn't last that long. So, you know, when I was 13,
yeah.
well, just before I turned 13, they separated. So it lasted for long enough, I guess,
yes.
you know, to make an impact. But, and the interesting thing about it is that I think she actually cared, but cared from a distance.
Okay.
Not as a parent. So
yeah.
it's a very interesting, I mean, I think the psychiatrist would have a heyday trying to figure that one out. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
And that happens to be Barack's mother, right?
No, not at all.
That wasn't Barack's mother.
Barack's mom was great.
Was different.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was a great person.
I mean,
she loved us in absentia.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting you experienced this from very close range, because many years later, you'd live in Europe.
Yes.
As a black person.
Yes.
With benefit of hindsight, don't you think it now played out in a way that maybe made you accept or probably deal better with being in, let's say, Europe?
A white society?
In a white society.
Well, she left when I was 13, so there was a big gap. And like I said, boarding school for me was my salvation. I went to, at that time, a very progressive boarding school. We really could be articulate. We really, by the time I was going to Europe, my identity was quite established in terms of who I was. As it is from my character, even since the age of 8, yeah. I was always very clear about certain things. You know, the idea of being treated differently because I was a girl, that really disturbed me, and I really fought against that. The idea of, I was very quiet as a child, actually. I didn't speak much, but I read a lot, I reflected a lot, and I kept it. I had my plan B all along. Okay. As one has a plan A that everybody wants you to do, be this, that, or the other, I had my plan B in my head, and I executed it, because that's why I ended up going to Europe, because I needed that space. I needed to get away. I knew it. I already knew from very young that I was going to leave to be somewhere where I could use my voice. That really, and I think that's why my foundation is called Sauti Kuu, because I honestly believed I needed to be able to be heard. I needed to be seen. I needed to be appreciated as a human being, and I didn't get that sense within the family as I lived at the time, yeah. within the community that I was in Kenya, and I needed to leave to go somewhere else to not reinvent myself, but to basically live out who I was. Okay. And so when I went to the West, my identity as a Kenyan, as an African, as a woman, I reflected so long, and I read all the right books, you know, Baldwin, all, you know, about, you know, African literature, the whole of what it was had to do with our continent, all the Pan-African literature I had read, you know, the African-American literature, you know, I had read all that before I came to Europe. So by the time I came to Europe, when people were racist to me or behaved like as if something was wrong, I was surprised, and I genuinely am always surprised when people are racist, because I think you're missing out. You know, you could be learning so much, we could be interacting. It's actually it's an enrichment to interact with each other, as opposed to being afraid, because I don't see the point. And this is something my father also taught me. He was very proud as an African. He always told me the white man is not any better. And in many cases, we are much, much more superior. That was his attitude. And that's what he gave me. So when I was out there, whenever there was racism or anything of that kind, I would be surprised. More so than offended, yeah. I'd be surprised. Like, what on earth is this about? And because I had my African identity, I speak my language, I know my culture, thank God. Due to the fact that my stepmother didn't want us around in the holidays, we were at my grandmother's. And I'm forever grateful for that, because I learned my language, I learned my culture. So I had a really strong base when I went to Europe. So, and this is something I passed on to my daughter. And I always tell her, you know, you are so much more than what anybody else thinks you are. And if you're in Europe and you can't speak their language and they're trying to be antsy with you, just speak our language. Let them struggle.
Yeah.
And then it completely changes the narrative. So don't try and fit in. Be you, and let them deal with that. And that's basically how I went to Europe. I learned very early just to be me.
And before you left, how did your father deal with this little struggle in your home?
Oh, he struggled with it because I asked why all the time. Well, the bit about the way my stepmother was, I think he tried to fix it by bringing his sister to live with us.
Yeah.
And beyond that, sorry, no offense to men, but as men are, very many things they don't see. So when the children are fed and dressed and all, they assume everything's okay.
Okay.
And the parent is a figurehead and you're authoritarian figurehead, so you don't tend to go to Papa if you have a problem. You just kind of like handle it with your mom or deal with it yourself.
Yes.
So he didn't really realize this was going on so much. Oh, I don't know. I never asked him. Unfortunately, he passed before we got to the stage where I could be asking those questions.
Yes.
But I did leave for Europe without telling him.
You did?
Yes, I wasn't sure he'd let me go. So I said I had my plan B, and I executed it.
But you were 16 then, didn't you?
No, I went when I was 19.
When you were 19?
I think, yeah, it was 19.
So how was it all facilitated?
I did a lot of, we call it in Kenya tarmacking. Like how people go and look for work, they tarmac. You know, the tarmac you walk around. So I went to very many offices, knocked on many doors until I got a scholarship. It took me 2 years. I started when I was in high school. I even did a year of university at home while I was still working on it. And then I got the scholarship. So I had to jump through some hoops to get my passport, because in those days, it wasn't so easy to get a passport without a signature of your parent.
Right.
So I had to jump through some hoops, but I did then finally. He found out when I had left that I was away.
Wow.
So it was a
what did he think though when he found out?
I think he was shocked and devastated,
Whoa.
But then he came to look for me, or basically to meet me, because I was actually really he was like all kind of like I thought he's so powerful, he's going to come and force me to go back home. But he came, and it was actually quite cathartic, because we talked. He was in my space, I was in a student's hall. He came, he actually stayed in my room. I left him my dorm room and he stayed there, which was not, dad staying in the dorms. It was like, and it was in a small town in Germany. And I remember him coming because he had a normal flight to Frankfurt, and then he took a smaller flight to this. I didn't even know there was an airport there. He to that place. Really, really scared, because I was like, what am I going to tell him? Because I just up and went. I really literally just up and went.
And this was how many years after you'd left?
It was like a year. He didn't last long. By the time he found out I was gone, it was not even a year. I was still learning the language, so it was less than a year.
Okay.
So he came and we talked, and I tried to explain to him why I went, and it was not easy. And he was devastated, because I think he assumed he was doing everything right, and that's a sad thing for parents. I'm a parent now, so I know. He thought he was doing everything right. And he didn't know me at all. Wow. He didn't know all of what we had gone through, and all of the pain that had happened in the family due to how the parents lived their lives. So he was hurt. But I think on the other hand, he was proud of the fact that I was in university. I didn't just run off and just go into a bad marriage or just go off. I had a plan.
Yes.
So I was at the university. So later on, I found out that he was actually quite proud of me.
Do you think it would have been better if your biological mother was still in the picture?
She was in the picture later, at a later date, but not living with us at all. I can't say that, because you know what happens, and I'm saying this as an adult, between two people you can't really know. The reason they separated, I can't judge that, So I can't even say. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what didn't work between them.
Yeah.
And this is the sad thing for children when it doesn't work with their parents. The children just have to deal with it. They have to deal with the wreckage.
Yes.
And there's no way you're going to make it easier for them by trying to explain, oh, it's because we're not compatible, or because of this or that. The fact still remains that a home is broken, and that's just as it is. And I think one of the things for me was very early, after the second home breakage, where my stepmom and my dad divorced. I think from that point I kind of came to the conclusion, I have to take care of me. I did it to extreme, I mean, as in my letter, as I talk about in my letter, but I realized that I can only depend on me. And that's where I really focused on what's going to happen next. How am I going to to live my life. My life became a lot more deliberate as a form of protection and as a form of survival. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about career. As a young person and around that age, did you have in your mind what you wanted to be?
Not at all. All I knew is I loved school, and actually not so much school, because school was difficult. It was a difficult time in my life, and I was a little bit of a rebel, and it was very authoritarian in Kenya, so sometimes it would be difficult to maneuver that space, but I loved university. I loved the discourse of higher education. So I didn't really know what I wanted to be. I needed to leave the country, so I chose the kind of subjects that helped me leave. So if I'm really, really honest, I didn't think of a career as such. I just thought I enjoy literature, I enjoy reading, I enjoy languages, so I went with that. And actually the interesting thing was, because I did in Germany you do a combination of bachelor and masters, so I did my masters, I went on to do my doctorate, and I was not thinking, how am I going to earn my money? That was the funny thing. And at some point I was like, oh, actually, you know what? You also have to earn money. You can't just continue to study.
And that's it.
Yeah, you've got to earn money.
You got to live.
You know, you got to live. And I was like, oh, okay, really? Because I was on scholarship. And then it was like, okay, what can I really do to earn money? And that's when I realized, I'm not really sure. And my dad, he was quite a character. Like I said, mathematician, economist, very pragmatic. When he found out, when he came at that time, when he came to find me and he found out I was doing German as one of my languages, it was one of my majors. He says, what are you doing learning German? every homeless person under the bridge can speak German. And then what? And many years later I was like, yeah, and then what? What you going to do with this, you know? So it was quite funny. But I've made my way. I mean, you know, I found ways to make it work. But I must say I didn't think it through at all.
What was your first job after school? After you figured out that...
My first job in school is a better question.
Oh, in school,
actually, when I was still in school, I was working as a swimming instructor and a lifesaver.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how I was earning my pocket money. At the YMCA in Nairobi.
Wow.
That was my, apart from babysitting, that was my first job. You know.
And in Germany?
In Germany, my first job was a student jobs. And this is where you can talk about the racism, because we'd go looking for work, and very often you'd get most of the gritty, horrible jobs, you know, like cleaning, washing in kitchens and all. And if you look for a job like in the office, they'd say, oh no, your German is not that good. They don't expect, you know, they would expect a German to do that. So it was hard to get a job that paid a lot more. But, you know, as a student, you don't really think too much about it. And I was on scholarship, so I was quite safe. I was secure financially. So I didn't have the hustle of, okay, you're really like studying and working overtime. I actually worked more so that I could come home every year, because I was very connected with coming back onto the continent. So I would make sure every year I came home. Yeah.
You went into journalism.
I did.
At some point.
A brief stint.
How did you get in there, and how was your stay in there?
I think journalism, in terms of doing it, you know, really full blown, was because, again, what I thought about it many years later, and I said, what is it that connects everything I do? And what connects everything that I do is communication, and being able to communicate with each other. And to articulate yourself and tell whatever story it is you have to tell. And that's what journalism is all about. So that was the first place I looked for, a space where I could tell, where I could have a discourse and discuss issues. And that was journalism. But it was in Germany. And again, in Germany, it was a situation at that time. Now it's changed a lot, and I'm grateful for that. At that time, if you went into journalism as a foreigner, as a black person, as an African, the assumption was that you can only handle African topics. You can only handle topics that have to do with culture, black people, and just the other topics, politics or whatever, education, science, whatever it is, you wouldn't necessarily get those topics to work on. And it was very frustrating for me, because I was like, I don't want to be typecast. And I kept having the sense that I was being typecast. I felt very limited in my possibilities and what I could do. And you actually, when you're a journalist, you work for somebody else. It's somebody else's vision. So if you're lucky and it aligns with your vision, and you're able to use that space, as you are doing, I'm assuming, to do the topics that you're passionate about, then it works. And at that time, it didn't work for me. The interaction, the communication, the discourse wasn't happening the way I was expecting it. And that's why I moved to film, because I thought, oh, I'll have more independence here, you know.
And I hope that worked better.
I went to film school and then I realized, oh, this is even more difficult. Because when you're a journalist, you've got the whole setup, you go out there, you get the team, and whatever topic you've agreed with your editor, you go and do it. Now with film, you're dependent on a whole crew of people. And again, I think it's a thing of the times and the kind of energy and the strength you have to box your way through is that, again, the topics, the stories you want to tell, somebody has to approve it because you're dependent on funding. So it was, again, I found there was a restriction because the medium I was trying to use to communicate, to bring across a message, to talk about issues that are important to me, was a medium that required such a complex network of people and funding, and even the means to get the funding. There were still limitations. As you can see, I'm a bird that needs to open their wings quite wide. And I just thought I was not going to be able to the extent that I needed, I was not going to be able to reach the people I needed to reach. So I felt this was not the right space for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the world can't contain you. Where was the right space then? What did you do next?
What I did next was then I moved to England. I was in Germany at the time.
Okay.
And in England, I started working just a mainstream job because I had a family, had to earn my money, earn a living. This became really acute. I realized you should have thought this through when you started studying, because now you've got to earn money first. You've got to live initially, because I was new to England.
Wait. Let me connect the dots here. So you just mentioned family now.
Yes.
And you moved to England.
Yes.
So you moved to England because of
family. Yes.
The family.
Yes.
Was he English?
Yes, I got married in England. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
But you met him in Germany?
Yes. Strangely enough, yeah.
And he just whisked you away to his country. I think that's what happened, isn't it?
Let's not make it too romantic. Let's just move on swiftly.
And you know, that's the thing about you. You're trying not to be romantic and not get me to touch on those soft spots. But I can see it in your eyes.
You know, the underbelly of the beast is not a good place to be.
Yes. No, but let's. I'm just quite interested. How, you've been able to find your way around Germany. I mean, you speak German, you know, and then this one comes and is like, young lady, I'm not leaving you here. And you're like,
crazy.
I'm right behind you.
Well, I'm actually back in Germany now. I understand the German space a lot better. It's really interesting because when I moved to the UK, I thought, oh, this will be easy because UK, unfortunately we were colonized, but we also have the red telephone box. Not anymore, but I'm just saying figuratively, we speak the same language. And I found the UK so foreign. So it was so alien for me. Really, I struggled with the UK because I think for me, Germany in terms of a country, despite all of the controversy around how the Germans are, if one wants, is the fact that they're very pragmatic, very practical, and very straightforward. A German will tell you what they think straight out, be it in the workplace, be it in the family situation, be it emotionally, they will tell you straight out, and you know exactly where you're at. Okay. And I tend to be that sort of a person. Like I said, got it from my father. So it works for me. So when I went to Germany, I found it very easy to navigate that space because people tell you what they think and they don't get offended. Everywhere else in the world, everybody gets offended and you've got to beat around the bush. And okay, I of course, I'm generalizing when I say everywhere in the world, but in this particular space that I was in, it's a discourse. You talk, you converse. We converse almost to death because everybody will argue a point, but it's okay. You don't go away feeling that somebody offended you, was rude to you, was trying to abuse you. And that worked for me really, really well. And people talk. The UK people are so polite. They're so, you don't know what anybody's thinking. And it was a situation where I would talk and I would say exactly what I think, and I could see eyebrows raised and people looking at me, and I was thinking, okay, what is going on here? I just did not connect. It did not stick. UK just did not work for me.
The marvels of Germany, the beauty of Germany, and yet when love came calling.
Okay, let's just change the conversation right there, okay? you're going in the wrong direction. Let me just tell you what I did in the UK so you can understand me better.
No, I'm going to finish what I'm saying.
You are not going to understand me better there. That is really, you should read my letter to my 13-year-old self.
I will do that because now I'm getting more,
intrigued. But it's actually, you're just going to be, you're barking up the wrong trees, leading nowhere. Okay. Because what actually happened?
No, it's okay. It was just for the moment. Don't worry. I was just being dramatic. So
the moment has passed.
I was just being dramatic because, anyway, but I totally understand you.
Yeah. The thing about the UK, what it did for me and what I'm grateful for is that I managed to get into that space. I realized very quickly in the UK, if you work hard and not afraid to push the boundaries, you can go quite far in terms of career, even if it's a new space. Because unfortunately, very often in the UK, what I experienced, and I did work with these young people, the ambition is lacking a lot in a lot of young people. I guess maybe because it's to a great extent, it's a welfare state, I call it that, because there's so many people who can so easily get onto the welfare, welfare states into the system and get a lot of support, which means they're less motivated to do a lot of things because they get a lot of things handed to them. At that time, maybe now not anymore with the changes that are going on in the UK, I'm sure you're aware of those. So at that time, it was easy if you work really hard and you push yourself that much more to move forward. And I then got the opportunity to start doing what I'm doing now actually, because I realized all along what I've been trying to do with communication, we're trying to make a difference. Because I'd already been dealing with, talking about a discourse around the developed world and the so-called developing world, and what is going on there, and how we can navigate that space in order to move to a space where everybody benefits. So I realized actually talking to adults, and I'd learned that in Germany, is not going to make a difference, because I would do workshops there, we would do seminars, and people would enjoy our seminars, they loved them, they would come. I used to call them repeat offenders, who would come to our seminars, and we would have the same discussions, and I realized they continue to ask the same questions, continue to discuss the same things, and I thought, I'm just entertaining them. I'm not getting anywhere with them, because they've got all their prejudices, all their bias is still there. They're just enjoying the time as entertainment. And I realized I need to work with younger people. I need to reach the children. It needs to become a way of life. So when I went to the UK, I got an opportunity to work in the youth services with the youth. And while I was working there, trying to, again, navigate the space, make a difference, help them, how I was helped as a young person to become whole young people, I realized I'm not going to make it in this country doing that. Because if you're going to change how young people are perceived, the spaces they get, the opportunities they get, create platforms for them, you need to delve into the culture. You need to deal with the adults. And there's such a big gap in the UK between the young people and the adults. They don't get along. They don't like it. Well, I daren't say that, but there's a mistrust of each other. The gap is so big. So trying to close that gap by making the adults understand the young people understand the adults, and come together to support these young people to be the future that we want, moving forward, I realized I can't do this. So that's when I said, I need to go back home. I can only do this at home.
Where you can relate
where
more.
I can really make a difference. And where it will be appreciated. Because I am sure if I do this at home, I will have the parents on board. I will have the adults on board. I'll have the community on board. And that's when I decided to come back home. And when I came back home, I first worked conventionally within an international organization in the NGO world, because like I said, my studies didn't lead me there. It was my passion that led me to this space. And to learn the ropes and to figure out how this works. And then I realized I have to do my own foundation, because the vision that I have, the way that I want to work, not only is it holistic, but there's a continuity. It will never stop. Regardless of whether funding is there or not, these children must, and their parents, their families must never notice that there's a gap in the work that we do towards helping them build their personalities, helping them develop, helping them realize that they're not poor, that their vulnerability is only based on the fact that they have a notion of not being able to help themselves, but they can actually help themselves.
And that's how come Sauti Kuu came into being. And how difficult was it starting back home?
It was difficult, but I'm sure now you know about me. I prepare quite well. So before I went home already, I started to think about how I can come home and prepare the space, because one of the things I didn't want to do, like I said, I have a daughter. I didn't want to come back and then have to struggle to the extent, like some colleagues of mine, that then you start longing for Europe and then you go back. And because when you go back, I think it's very hard to come back a second time. So I was going to make it so that I can stay. So I made sure that when I initially came, I needed to have an induction, in that I wasn't going to straight away try and do something myself. I was going to get involved, get employment within a structure that already exists, to see what is the terrain like, how are people working, is it working the way these people are doing it, you know, the notion that I have that I can do it differently, is it real? And so I worked for 5 years first in an organization, International Care International, to learn the ropes, to see how it was done, until I realized that what I want to do is different, and also until I had the courage to say, okay, I'm going to, you know, forfeit that comfortable salary and the comfortable situation that I'd got myself in, and go it alone. Yeah.
What was when you started the foundation on your own, what was the main thing that you really wanted to work on? What was that one thing that was leading the journey?
The conversation with the young people, rattling them, motivating them, getting them to feel passionate about something, about improving their lives, about being their own future. And that was a struggle. It took me at least 1.5 years before they would even really talk to me.
Why was that?
Because...
Was it because of how they were naturally socialized to not talk much?
I think because our education system doesn't prepare young people to answer the question, what do you want? Not even what do you want to do with your life, what do you want? Because we do what our parents say, what the church says, what our peers say, you know, what the community wants us to do. Young people, children are not asked their opinion. And unfortunately, I'll talk about my own culture for now, in order not to offend anybody. In the environment, the culture that we live in, children are not asked. So when I started asking, and it was a genuine question, not loaded, not because I expect them to tell me they're going to succeed in their careers and become lawyers and doctors. It was just a simple question. And the other question I asked was, what will it, because I'm working in the rural area, I said, what would it take for you to remain in this rural area and not leave, and still prosper and still have a good life and be able to you know, to achieve your goals? What would it take to make you remain? And they couldn't answer that. And for 1.5 years, I would meet them at least once a month, if not twice, when I was starting. And we would try and have the conversation. We'd have a wonderful meal spread out, and we would try and talk. And they didn't have an answer. It took them that long. And then I had to find techniques, you know, activities and techniques and ways to make them become more articulate. And that's when, to get that powerful voice out of them, that was the first thing that I needed to do.
Okay. Now, you've often spoken about development in Africa, the relationship between the developed world and the developing world. Some school of thought suggests that, look, the developing world would always be at the mercy of the developed world. The relationship is not balanced. It's almost always like there's a give and take. Somebody's just giving and somebody's just taking, that kind of relationship. I mean, what can be done to, from your perspective and your experience, what can be done to make it better?
I think the first thing we have to realize, and when I talk about the developing world, now I'm talking about Africa. And on this one, I can generalize. I don't tend to generalize about Africa, because I think it's important to talk about individual countries so that people see these countries, because everybody thinks Africa is a country. All over the world, people talk about Africa as if it's a country. Even we do. And we must stop doing that. We have to first realize these are different countries, individual countries. Some large, I mean, the UK is tiny in comparison. Yeah. So these are countries, that's very, very important. And when you think about that, then you start thinking about the individual, you think about our identity. And I think the thing that needs to happen is we as Africans have to start realizing that we are responsible for our destiny, for our future. We are responsible for what happens to us. And we cannot blame anybody else. We can no longer blame colonialism. We can talk about colonialism and we can say that is where it came from, that we are insecure, or that we have this education system, or that we don't appreciate ourselves. Yes, we can recognize that. But from here on, It's time that we took responsibility. It's just like with the parents. Our parents have done a lot that have maybe messed us up or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's your life. You have to sort it out. You have to live it. And this is the trouble. We keep looking to the West. We keep looking to the developed world. And even the term developed and developing, that's relative. It's based on a concept that the West is better developed than us. It is more civilized than us, is much further than us, more progressive than us. Who defines that? Why do we let ourselves be defined by the rest of the world when we could be easily defining ourselves? We need to tell our own story. And in order to do that, we need to have a voice to be able to tell our own story. So again, Sauti Kuu, powerful voices. And how does that happen? Not just because Auma Obama is running a foundation. It happens because we start paying attention to the kind of education we're giving our children. It's going to be a mix of Western education, but we need to include our own African culture, our own learning, the teachings of our forefathers, etc., etc. Sounds like a romantic notion, but it isn't, because that's what Europe is based on. All of their history, all of their arrogance and their confidence is based on the history that they have, going back hundreds of years, thousands of years. Why can't we do the same? In fact, we have to do the same, because if we don't, we never know who we are. I was able to be strong in Europe because I went there with, I had, in my luggage was my language, my heritage, the traditions. I knew it all. And I knew that it was there, it defined me, it was part of who I was.
Right.
And it needs to be included in the education system. So if we don't pay attention to that, we will never learn. And we keep sending our kids out. I'm the same, but luckily this time I send mine to Accra. But we send our kids out, we learn about those cultures. They fight and struggle to compare and to say we're equally, of equal standing, but they have nothing to work with because we've given them nothing to go with. They have no material to work with. So they're stuck with the Western ways, the Western history, the Western definition of who we are. And when we start changing that, we will then look inward and start changing how our countries are run, how our communities are run, how even our families are run. We don't even teach our children our own languages within the home itself. How that?
You're an amazing voice for this continent, and we are proud of you.
Thank you.
We are so proud of you. What's the biggest lesson life has taught you?
Oof. The biggest lesson life has taught me, in a general way, is that you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. You need others. You need to be many. And actually, the other day somebody said to me, yeah, you sound like such a rebel, and you tell people to go out and do it differently and not not accept this or that behavior or this or that treatment. And they said, but those people who do that, they get killed, they disappear. And I said, that's because they are doing it in isolation very often, or they're very few. They don't have many people who are behind them or supporting them. So they're easily identified in the crowd and they're easy targets. But if, as a people, we start thinking differently, and that's why I say in my foundation, we work with children from the ages of 4 to 25. So it's a wide scope. And the reason is because when you start when the kids are young, and start teaching them to be proud of themselves, to be able to use their voice with all respect, not being rude or a rebel, and they grow up different, it becomes a way of life, then that generation of 4-year-olds, when they're adults, it's normal for them to interact in a way that there's a conversation around what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. And that's why for me the lesson learned really is you can't do it alone. You need numbers in order to be able to make that impact, but you have to have the right numbers, the right role models, the right people on your side.
What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear? My greatest fear, that's a big one, because there are a lot of fears along the way. I think I have a sense of urgency, because I have a sense that I see so many things that could be different. I know it's not going to happen in my lifetime, and my greatest fear is that we don't make it. My greatest fear is, take just a stupid, it's not a stupid example, it's a very real example. You take GMO products that are now being brought into the continent. And we have our own indigenous crop. We have our own indigenous seeds that we can keep a cup of it, and when the next harvest comes, we can plant. So the subsistent farmer will always be able to eat. Even if they can't buy their child new clothes because they need money for that, they can at least eat. And my biggest fear is that we're not going to catch on quickly enough to prevent some of the things that are being brought into the continent, some of the things that are going to destroy us and take away our ability to regain our independence. We're not independent. It's a notion of independence. All our countries, it's a notion of independence. And that's my greatest fear, because I feel that if we don't get on with it, we are going to sell out. The whole continent, already our natural resources have been taken from us, but we can still mentally regain so much and turn it around. It's like global warming. We need to get on with it.
Right. What's your biggest regret?
My biggest regret? Oh. Well, a regret would be something that I didn't do right? Normally. Is that what you're thinking?
If it makes you feel better.
Because there are different regrets. You can have a regret that something has happened to you that you'd have liked to have happened differently.
The one you're thinking about, that's the one I want to hear.
My biggest regret? Oh.
You are thinking it, but ask whether you want to say it.
It's not good to regret, because then you're looking back and you can't change.
I know that, but you're still thinking it, so I'd want to know what it is.
Biggest regret?
I mean, something you wish you could have done differently.
Could have done
basically.
differently. It's too personal. I don't think I can even say it. It's really too personal.
Should I give you options?
No, because you don't know my regrets. Don't even go there. Don't even go there.
Okay.
No, let me just think. Let me think of a general regret.
No, I want the personal one.
The personal one, I
want to
would
learn
not talk.
from it as well, Auma. I want to learn from it too.
I don't, because you see, the biggest regret is a regret that you cannot learn from, because I think it's things that happen to you, you see. And for me, I think maybe, how would I put it? I think my biggest regret, it's going to be very abstract, so don't smile. My biggest regret is refusing to be vulnerable.
Okay.
That's my biggest regret. Insisting on being strong.
And you know what's interesting? You're doing that right now.
Yep.
You're doing that exact same thing right now.
Yes, exactly.
You're trying hard not to be vulnerable, right?
That is true.
I'm right, eh?
That is true.
Okay.
And that is something that is, but it's also a survival instinct. So that's why I was careful and trying to figure out how to put it.
I'm not a dangerous species, Dr.Auma Obama.
Life can be dangerous. And this
I
is the thing.
understand that, but in this space you're safe.
And no. Life can be dangerous, and to be honest, I think, and I don't have that.
Okay.
Many people go through life a little bit, and it's not in a bad way. I would love to be like that.
Okay.
Like a child walking into, I don't know, a place where there are all these obstacles and they don't see the dangers. Like I have more the instinct of a parent. And where you're constantly like this. So that's why not allowing yourself to be vulnerable and being strong is a way to maneuver life. And that's actually almost all my life. And when you've done that for such a long time, as you can see, it's very difficult to change that. It's very
I just like how consistent you are.
Yes, I am very consistent.
Yeah. Because I see how you've tried to not be so vulnerable today. That's okay. It's okay. I understand.
It's a survival instinct, and I think everybody has their own based on what life has dished out.
That's okay.
And then you say, okay, this is how you're going to work through this in order to get, and I actually do in my head always have a plan B. Yeah. Always. Okay. Always have a plan B.
Okay, I hear you. Yeah. I'm okay with that. It's just safe to say that you executed your plan B right now perfectly. I mean, before we wrap this, there's a very little matter of.
Oh dear, here it comes.
Yeah. Of course, we can't not talk about it. Of
the
your
elephant
older
in the
brother.
room.
The elephant in the room, absolutely. Your
older brother. Because I'm 29 forever, right?
Pardon me. Yeah.
I love that. Thank
your
you.
Little brother.
At least that's what you took away.
Your little brother, like you tweeted,
Yes.
"Hey, little bro, how you doing?" I was like, "Oh, she must be smiling behind that tweet." You know what I mean?
It was so funny. It was just instinctive.
Yes.
I just kind of thought, why not? And it
was
caused
so
a
funny.
storm. But I was very disappointed because I got more tweets for that than for things that I find are more important.
I know.
Because that was just like a statement.
Yes.
But poignant things that really matter, people don't really repeat them. I'm like, why is this so
It had almost
key?
2,000 retweets.
Yeah, I was like, how? I was it confused me. Completely, but then again, that's the world of, exactly, that's the digital world.
That's the digital world. Now, what I want to find out about the whole, my little brother is president of the United States. Of course, your name, your surname now became a household name the world over. But were there negatives to it?
Oh yeah, of course there were negatives. I mean, already just the campaign, there was a lot of firefighting and a lot of, making sure that we're all okay, making sure that we don't take everything personally, because initially I was like the champion of, the warrior, taking everything personally and realizing that, this is part of how this game is played. So it was not easy. It was not easy for us, but as best we could, we were prepared for it, but it was not always. It was not all rosy. Definitely not.
Okay.
Definitely not.
But now, what is it like carrying the Obama name?
Everybody knows the name, so that's quite interesting. A lot more people have the name because, as you know, as Africans, so everybody was born the year that he became president, or even became senator. The Obamas, when he became president, the Obamas and Michelles, and the Obama name has spread. It used to be just our family that had that name, and now the name is across the globe. People calling their children Obama. So that was already, it kind of like. Made us very a household kind of like, if you so want, a brand, and I have always been very low key. So although I was in the spotlight a little bit, I kept a very low profile. I tried because I'm not very articulate on a personal level. It's always about work. It's always about what I'm doing with my foundation. But never about my family. So it was possible to keep the interests kind of at a low level because I was not doing anything crazy. So we maneuvered it. It was not easy, but yeah.
Are you motivated to get into politics, mainstream politics?
Oh, can you imagine me in mainstream politics?
That'll be disastrous,
It'd be disastrous, wouldn't
it? I mean, they would have to run for their lives.
Yeah, because I say what I think, and I'm not so diplomatic, and and I'm not, like I said, I don't toe the line, so it wouldn't work for me at all. Not at all. Not at all.
Great. Yeah. I've enjoyed spending time with you, and I'm totally grateful. As we wrap up, I just want you, in a few seconds, if you had to advise any young person who looks up to you, what would it be?
I would tell that young person, you are your future. You are responsible and accountable for your future. Yes, you'll get help along the way. You'll get people will block you or limit you, but you are responsible for your future. And if you can understand that and you can focus, you will make it. That's what I would tell young people. Don't blame. Don't make others responsible. Don't moan. Just get on with it.
Get on with it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're amazing. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we wish you all the best with the Sauti Kuu Foundation.
Wait behind calls to uncap Get Fund. The funds raised from Get Fund levy is not fully invested in the education sector, with government releasing only a fraction. We'll hear from him shortly, but first listen to President of NUGS, Dennis Apialabi, presented a petition to Parliament demanding that the fund be uncapped.
In 2023, then our biggest problem...
Yes. It's been a great conversation. I've totally enjoyed myself. I hope you have as well. On Personality Profile with Dr.Auma Obama, who founded the Sauti Kuu Foundation, or the Dr.Auma Obama Foundation. Stay tuned in to Joy News, and you can actually check our YouTube page as well. If you missed any part of this conversation, it will play back. It's a very enthralling one, and I've enjoyed it. On behalf of my technical crew, my production team, thank you for spending time with us. I'm Lexis Bill.